everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is going to be a slightly late weekly-ish, I guess, update. So I have 4 books to talk to you about today. And like always, we'll move from the lowest to the highest rated. So before we get started, leave a mask emoji in the comments to let me know that you're here. Like a fun mask, like Mask of Mirrors mask. Okay, so the first book I'll talk about today is a 3-star book, and that's Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw. So I received this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this comes out October 18th. So this is an adult horror novella where basically we have a group of friends who book an abandoned mansion in Japan for a wedding, only to discover that a ghost bride lurks there. So this was good, but it just wasn't as exciting or as good of a fit for me as I had hoped. Basically, I think it is a novella, so it was over just a bit too quickly for me to really connect to the story and with the characters. It's honestly kind of bizarre to the point where I'm not entirely sure what I read at times, and I think it just wasn't quite as much of a ghost story as I had necessarily expected, and I definitely ended it thinking like, that's it? That being said, I'm so glad that I tried it because I was super intrigued by the premise, especially that cover. That is like one of the creepiest covers I've ever seen, so, props to whoever designed that. But, I did also want to try something by this author because I've heard some pretty good things in general, but, it is a quick read being a novella, and I will say some of the descriptions did feel a little bit overdone at times to the point of kind of feeling pretentious. So I think this kind of makes me wonder if this particular writing style for this author leans more towards literary horror. So I classify like Stephen Graham Jones as literary horror, and I know that doesn't really work well for me, so I'm not terribly surprised that the writing style, if it is, more of this literary horror here, doesn't work as well for me. We also have some pretty disgusting descriptions and moments, so I guess your mileage with that may vary. I did really like this idea of the haunted house though, but I think I just needed more time to really explore it for me to enjoy it a little bit more. I feel like I don't really know or like any of the characters. The main character, Kat, is alright. I think Kat is loyal to her friends even if they don't necessarily deserve it. And I kind of felt like I was missing her backstory. Like, I felt like I was just dropped into a story that had already been going on, and so I just feel like there were a lot of things alluded to where I don't know, like I felt like I should have known the backstory, but I just didn't. So that was just kind of an odd thing, I guess. But I did also appreciate how some of the characters are self-aware with horror tropes. So in general, I would still recommend this, especially if you're looking for a short horror read, or if you do enjoy this more literary writing style. Again, if you like Stephen Graham Jones, you probably also like this. But for me personally, this particular writing style doesn't always work the best. And 3 stars is still pretty good. I did enjoy my time with it. There were just things about this book that prevented me from loving it. So then we have a couple of 3.5-star books to talk about. The first one is For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing. So I buddy read this with Amber from Books of Amber. And this is an adult thriller set at a prestigious private school where Teddy has won the Teacher of the Year, but he can't be bothered by the death of a school parent that looks more and more like murder, or the student who's digging a little bit too deep into his personal life. His focus is on pushing kids to their full academic potential, and he just wants his colleagues and meddlesome parents to stay out of his way. So this was still entertaining, but I think it's my least favorite of Samantha Downing's books. It was very fast-paced. That is true for all of her books. We have a lot of really short chapters, so it makes it really easy to just fly through this. I liked this dark academia type setting where, bad things are happening at this school, and I will say the mystery here was lacking a little bit. Like, it almost felt like a comedy of errors at times, and it just started to feel more and more like over the top to the point of just feeling a little bit ridiculous. Still, I did want to keep reading to find out, just what was going on here, and I generally did have a fun time at the school. I will say there are some content warnings, mild content warnings. It does mention COVID for no particular reason, I guess. I was a little bit taken aback there. Like, I didn't think it really took place during the pandemic, but it mentioned COVID a couple times. So I was like, Okay, but yeah, so I figured I would mention that in case that is something that bothers you. Moving on to the characters, none of them were particularly likable, and this is generally true across all of her books. Like, there's a lot of unlikable characters, but usually in previous books at least, there was still somebody I could like kind of root for or found really entertaining to follow. But here, they all just kind of suck. So Teddy is so full of himself. He's this teacher, and he takes it upon himself to do things, you know, for their own good. And that doesn't always work out so well. He's a pretentious jerk, and I just didn't like him at all. We have Zach, a student who, you know, I found him to be mildly more motivating. He's kind of caught in an unfortunate situation where his rich parents are putting a lot of pressure on him. He's got his teacher, Teddy, who doesn't really like him. And he is trying to help out one of his friends, but, you know, ends up kind of getting entangled in things. And I felt a little bit more for him just in general because he is just a kid and he's following things that he's been told all of his life. And, you know, he is trying to navigate through the world. We do have a smattering of other characters that we follow. And I felt like they were often introduced, but not really super developed. Generally, again, this was one that I was like, huh, okay. After finishing it, I would describe it as fun, but the other ones are better. Still, I did have a fun time with this, and if you're looking for a really fast-paced thriller set at, you know, a private school, this dark academia setting, I would certainly recommend picking this up. The next 3.5-star book I'll talk about is Within These Wicked Walls by Lauren Blackwood. So I received this for review from the publisher through NetGalley, and this comes out October 19th. So this is a YA gothic/urban fantasy retelling of Jane Eyre. We have Andromeda, who is essentially an exorcist. She's hired to cleanse households of the evil eye. A handsome young heir named Magnus Rochester hires her, but Andromeda ends up realizing there's more to this job and Magnus himself than she bargained for. So this is, I would say, a very loose retelling of Jane Eyre. There's definitely some shared elements here where it's really fun to see how certain aspects from, you know, the original story are reimagined for this particular setting and time, but it also does its own thing a bit. So I think the pacing was pretty good in general, though the middle kind of went down this path full of YA tropes and things, you know, with like crying and romance. I was a little bit ambivalent about this and kind of just wanted it to return to, you know, the fun, exciting manifestations and trying to cleanse this house of the evil eye. There were a lot of really interesting ideas here, and I did like the setting. So it takes place in Ethiopia. And we have, again, these, like, exorcist-type people who make amulets against the evil eye and cleanse, you know, cleanse households and whatnot. I really liked all the different manifestations and how creepy some of these are. Like, I think some of them lean almost towards horror, which was really exciting to see. And I just generally wanted more of this, and, again, missed it during these more traditional YA moments. Still, I think the ending does pull it back together, and I would certainly read more in this world. Since this is a loose retelling of Jane Eyre, like, I wouldn't imagine there would be a sequel or anything like that, but I think it'd be really cool to, like, take this same sort of setting and, you know, do even more retellings of different classics. I think that would be super fun. Again, this is just me spitballing here. I don't know if that's at all a plan, but I think that'd be cool. So this book does deal with a lot of family issues. Andromeda has a bit of an interesting background where it's not always the most healthy, but I really liked some of the development that we get with her. Magnus has, you know, this family curse that's been passed down from his father, and he obviously has a bit of a strained relationship with his parents. Andromeda was a very enjoyable main character overall. She's really strong and determined, and I liked how she's skilled at making these amulets to, you know, ward off the evil eye, and just generally how it was super fun to watch her fight the evil eye. She accepts this job as a way to make a life for herself because essentially she's trying to find a patron because she's not licensed, and having a patron will help her get jobs. She's never really had anyone who's been physically or emotionally affectionate with her, so she doesn't entirely know how to handle her attraction to Magnus. I do appreciate how she acknowledges this, though, and it's kind of like, I think there were some moments where she was like, this is really not the time to be dwelling on it. I can't help myself, though, but so that was kind of funny for me. Magnus, I think, is a little bit naive and controlling. I get why he has certain reasons for some of the rules for his household and why he's isolated himself. So, like, on one hand, I do feel bad for him, but on the other hand, he has, like, really horrible timing for things and doesn't always listen to Andromeda with what she says that she wants. So, I was kind of mixed on the romance overall. I initially felt like Andromeda had more of a spark with somebody else than with Magnus. So, yeah, I mean, Again, I kind of mentioned this like traditional YA stuff with the romance. It's a lot of angst, and I just didn't always feel it at times. So we also have Andromeda's father figure, who's a very complicated man. He's kind of this tough love type of person that sometimes crosses the line, but I think he does have a heart overall. And generally, I liked getting to know him more and see him involve some with Andromeda. I also really liked Saba, who's a person in Magnus's household. She's very sweet, and I just love getting to know more about her past. So generally, I did have a really good time with this. Admittedly, like the crying and YA types of things didn't always work well for me, but I thought this was a really fun retelling and a very interesting world. I will say there are some content warnings for some abusive relationships. But yeah, so overall, I would definitely recommend this. I think it's a very promising debut, and I thought it was a fun retelling of Jane Eyre. Finally, the last book I'll talk about today is a 4.5-star book, and that's The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. So this is the writing duo of Marie Brennan and Alyce Helms. So this is adult fantasy where we follow Rin, who's a con artist who has come to the city with one goal. She is trying to trick her way into a noble house to secure her fortune and her sister's future. Her masquerade is one of many in the city, and as nightmare magic starts to weave its way through the city, we have these feuds of aristocrats and the dangers of the city's underbelly becoming tangled with Rin. So this was so good and just so intricate. I will say the first chapter or so was a little bit hard to get into because you have a bunch of names and terms thrown at you, and it's just a little bit overwhelming. Things start to make more sense. I think with the names, there are multiple names used for the same person, so it did take me a little bit to kind of figure out who everybody was. But I think the pacing in general is also on the slower end. There are some very long chapters, so that can affect things, I think. But I think there were also some really exciting, intense moments, particularly in the middle and the end. But yeah, so I think the first part was certainly much slower than the rest, but I think it helped establish all these relationships that we have going on. There's a lot of great character work here and world building, and I ended up really invested in the plot and really just needed to know what all was going on. We have lots of layers to unpack here, which is exciting. We have these noble houses. There's mysteries with the identity of this Robin Hood type figure. There's we're trying to figure out what's been happening with all these missing children, and there's just generally conspiracy, lies, and deceptions. So I think this wasn't entirely what I anticipated. I had seen something about nightmare magic going into this, and I kind of had a completely different thought in my mind as to where the story would really go. I had a really great time finding out where the story was going, because again, I enjoyed being surprised here and finding out that there were so many layers to unpack here. We do have several different types of magic in the world. I think not all of them are super well explained, but it's fun to get tidbits of all of them. There's basically you can imbue items with certain abilities. There's these sigils that can be carved for a purpose. Then we also have something resembling tarot, and there's even more. So I really liked the tarot part in particular. It's something I always find fascinating, and there are patterns that arise from this and implications with gods and how it affects the world. So that was really cool to see. Again, I think this world building is really interesting. It reminded me of a Venice type setting, but we have a mix of cultures here with some pretty tense relations between all the different peoples of this world. Once certain aspects get introduced, I'm trying to keep that vague, we also have this nightmarish aspect to things, which was really fun to see. I absolutely loved Rin, our main character. She's this con artist, and she's extremely resourceful. She certainly has her own goals in mind and can be ruthless to achieve these, but, I think she also deeply cares about her people, and, it's one of those things where once she forms a bond with them, she wants to be all in with them. I think she's very clever, and I really enjoyed watching her pull off all these schemes and, having her plans come together. We have Vargo, who's a somewhat mysterious man who, wants to be powerful and deal with the nobles. I want to trust him, but he's clearly got some secrets, and I just really, really need to know more about him and get some answers. I think the next book focuses a little bit more on him, so I'm super excited about that. We also have a member of what is essentially a local police force who's trying to figure out what happened to his brother. I really liked him, but I feel like I don't know him quite as well as some of the other characters. He does come from a bit of a different background as the rest of the people in the police force, and it's one of those things where his own people think that he's betrayed them a bit by, you know, working for the enemy, but he's actually trying to help them and try to implement change. But yeah, of course we have all sorts of assorted nobles. There are far too many for me to talk about in detail here, but I will say some of them are nicer than others, but basically all of them have some sort of scheme going on and some sort of ulterior motive. I really enjoyed watching Rin interact with all the different nobles and, generally speaking, how all these relationships between our characters change over time. Like, I think the character work, again, and these relationships are one of the main strong points of this particular book, and I just had such a great time with it. It is a very LGBTQ plus friendly world. All of this is accepted and normal, so that was great to see. Lots of fun diversity here, and yeah, I mean, I thought this was just phenomenal, and I can't wait for the next one, which is exciting because I think that comes out, it's supposed to come out in December, so something to look forward to, certainly. But yeah, I would absolutely recommend this. I will say, like, I don't think it's going to be a good fit for everybody just because of the slower pacing and because there are so many things going on here. It is a very intricate book, but if you are, like, up for that challenge and if you do like somewhat more character-driven books, I think this would be a really great fit. So with that, those are all the books that I have to talk to you about today. I am currently reading an arc of You Sexy Thing by Rambo, which is really fun. It's like space opera meets, I think they said, the British Bake Off, but it's giving me very strong Wayfarers vibes, and there's a squid person, so I'm like super excited about that. But I'm having a fun time with that so far. And yeah, in terms of what I'm going to read next, I don't know. Maybe some horror books. We'll see. We'll see what mood strikes me, I guess. So yeah, I guess let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or think you might pick them up. And for your question today, what is your favorite book set in an academic type place? So I do have a Discord channel, and if you want to join that, the link's in the description below. I hope you're all having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.